Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's. Hello, beautiful friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I am over the moon to have you here. How are you doing? How are you basking in and celebrating love? As Valentine's Day approaches, of course, I'm thinking of you, and I love you all so much. So I'm thinking of you. I'm thinking of my sweet friend, Sharon. I know I've told you about her. I've had her on the podcast. She's one of the amazing presenters at the Say Yes Summit that's happening next week. But my sweet friend, Sharon, speaking of love, her birthday is in February, and she is just the most fun person anyone has ever met, but for sure the most fun person I've ever met. And side note, when I go to her house, I feel as if I have never hosted a house guest or thrown a party in my life. That's how magical she is and the space she makes. And yes, her birthday is this month. And yes, my thoughts are full of her. And I know this is sounding like I'm giving you the bio of who our guest is today. It's not. I'm just telling you all of this to tell you that she is so fun and loves February so much that she writes with a red pen all month long. Is that not the most darling thing? She's the cutest. The first birthday that she celebrated in us being friends, I purchased her a red pen, and she's so cute. She still uses it. And I think that was probably 26 years ago. 25 years ago. So hooray, hooray for love, hooray for all the different ways it shows up in our lives. Hooray for red pens and hearts and chocolate and champagne and all those good things. I would really love to know how you are loving on yourself this week, this month. How are you being your own Valentine? It's just important. I hope that listening to this podcast is an act of love that you grant to yourself. And I'm so grateful that you do. It feels like a gift of love that I grant myself. Before I tell you about today's guest, though, and talking about Sharon, reminded me that we have our first Say Yes Summit is coming up next week, and it's so fun. People have been registering for that. All of our 8 speakers are super excited. You will recognize them from the podcast. We have Jarena Willisey, we have Anna K. Morris, Stephanie Affinito, Pamela DeSalt, Ria Kujat, and as I mentioned, my bestie, Sharon Nichols. So this is going to be so amazing. It is not too late to sign up. It is February 18th and 19th. It's virtual. It's on Zoom. It's $47. There's a link in the show notes to save your spot, but don't worry if you're working or traveling or doing something between the hours of 1 and 4, because it will be recorded and all those recordings will be sent to you, and you can just pop that in your ear and have a little longer experience that you have when you listen to this podcast. And if you're able to make it live, you'll be able to interact with the speakers, and we'll have time for Q&A, and it will just be a total love fest, which apparently is my theme today. So today's guest Also, continuing the Love Fest is Danita Cummins. She is the founder, business strategist. She's an author of Entrusted to Lead, and she hosts a podcast. She's a seasoned career and business coach with nearly 30 years of experience in the Department of Defense, where she has led diverse teams in special operations and cutting edge technology deployments. In her transformative book, Promise Over Purpose, Danita offers a refreshing perspective on achieving a fulfilling life by shifting focus from the relentless pursuit of purpose to grounding oneself in God's promises. Danita is also the founding director of the Alpha Life Pregnancy Center, where she supports women through pregnancy decisions, parenting, adoption, and infant loss. She hosts the Entrusted to Lead podcast, exploring the intersection of leadership and faith driven values. Her passion for creating meaningful one on one coaching experiences shines through in every aspect of her work, helping leaders and organizations achieve their full potential. She is delightful. Her book, Promise Over Purpose, is fantastic, and I cannot wait to share this really expansive conversation with Danita Cummins. Danita, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for your time.
Oh, you are very welcome. Thanks for doing this today. It's super exciting.
It is. And we've already had such a fun little chat before hitting record, which is always some good time.
It is. That's exactly right. Yes.
It is. So let me start off with the question that I ask all of my guests. And that is, how are you saying yes to yourself in this season?
I think that's such a great question. I was actually talking to my daughter about it last night. And so the one way I'm showing up for myself in the season, saying yes to myself, is I'm taking a much needed break, which is probably maybe reverse from what most people would be saying. We're kind of coming to a season of rest. And so I'm being intentional about putting myself first. So like today when we get done, I'm going to have a spa day. So
brilliant.
Yes. So that's how I'm saying yes to myself, is just listening to my emotional tank and my heart, that's telling me we're kind of coming to a season of rest. And so along that same line is also just making sure that I'm kind of letting my yes be yes and my no be no, like in that space where you're kind of like saying no to things and doing it guilt-free. So,
yes, please.
Yeah.
Because it's actually not doing anyone a favor. When you say yes, when you mean no, it's kind of like we were talking earlier, and you have 4 kids. I was a youth pastor for many years.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
that teenage, and I was a teenager also. So there's that teenage reasoning that sounds very believable inside the head of the teenager, but it is very obvious to the mother's ears that
That's
this
right.
is not the truth. And I think the same thing happens when we say yes, when we really want to say no. We're not fooling anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing that I've learned over all these years is like that all builds up, right?
Yeah.
Whether we know it or not, in whatever we want to call it, resentfulness, disappointment, it can turn into bitterness, like it's not going to end well in whatever way you slice it. And so that's the thing I'm learning, is more people coming in, asking for things, and it being okay to say, really taking a step back. And I had a really great mentor. I watched her wait on the Lord in her faith, journey. It was a beautiful thing to watch her wait with intention, like the active state of waiting, which is what I kind of learned from it, was like, wow, there's a lot she's doing in this waiting season, but she really looked at every problem or situation or opportunity and then brought it back and used her value lens to really intentionally look at it and say, is this something that I want to put my hand to? And then you knew when she committed, like she was all in, And so, yeah. So I just think there is such value in that space where you get to that, where you're like intentionally holding space for yourself and being like, do I really want to do this? And, and it's better for you and everybody else in the long run. So
it's true.
yeah.
I have a personal mantra that I've been exercising the past 4 years, I'd say, that I am only available for what delights me.
Mm, that's so good.
So that's how my yes is my yes and my no is a no.
Yeah,
And I can run it through that grid and it works for me. And of course, it's my disclaimer. Sometimes there are things that I need to do that are not
that's
delightful
right.
on their own,
Yeah,
but they are in service to the thing that delights me. For
yeah,
example, I have to clean the chicken coop because I enjoyed having chickens. So
yeah,
there are practices that go along with it, but overall, I am not doing one thing that I do not desire to do.
yeah. How did you come to that place where you figured that out? Because I feel like there's a lot of us that kind of struggle with that space where you're kind of like you take a step back. Maybe it's a season of your life or whatever it is, like we were talking about earlier. But you get to that place where you're kind of like, what do I enjoy? Like
Mhm.
what brings me joy? Did you find that as you were going through, like you had to do a discovery journey on yourself to kind of figure
It
out what
was the
those were?
pandemic, so
Mm,
there was this global discovery journey happening.
that's right.
I was also in the midst of a very active personal development discovery journey.
Sure.
And I grew up in the church and I was totally happy and all was well. And then I was introduced to some different interpretations of things. And then I
Mm-hmm.
was introduced to some behavior of people that
Mm, right.
probably God was as disappointed as I was. I don't
Oh,
know. Like, I don't want to
yeah,
put
that's
words in
fair.
his heart, but
Mm-hmm. Right.
what happened was I took my childlike understanding of everything that all the people in this room say is the same as everything that's in the book that we're reading from,
Right.
because I was just a kid. So I just thought everybody that went to church were speaking divine words from the Lord.
Yeah.
And I twisted myself into a pretzel to fit into all of those molds because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And nobody was mad that I was doing it also.
Right. Right.
And so during that global pause and some an introduction to some other spiritual teachers that
Mm-hmm.
I really resonated with, I started on a path of discovery of like what do I actually believe
Yes.
and how does that play out in my life and what is that going to look like going forward. And so I would say overall I have never felt closer to God
Mm.
and farther away from the church than
Wow.
I do in this moment.
In this season.
So,
Yeah.
yes, just to catch
Wow.
you up. My
Oh, thank
listeners
you.
already know that. You're welcome. So, what was happening was I was listening to a podcast, a woman named Gina DeVee, and her podcast is called Divine Living. And I was shoveling snow at the time, and she was talking about creating an ideal client checklist
Mm-hmm.
and creating these areas of what she's available for and what she's not available for. And this is my company, and I get to decide who
Right.
my clients
Right.
are, which was also revolutionary
Yeah.
to think of.
Exactly.
And so she suggested that the listener create a personal mantra of what they're available for.
Mm.
And I was shoveling snow and words just fell out of my mouth. I am only available for what delights me. And then I laughed out loud because, like, oh, is that allowed? Is that how we're doing this now? Okay. And then I said that to a couple of people and they laughed and said, oh, is that a thing? Can you do
Wow.
that? And I said,
Wow.
I'm going to do it. I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying it. I'm doing it now. And I am a quick study
Wow.
because when I learns if I find a new restaurant, everyone's going to know about it if it was great. When I started taking these trips to Paris, I'm going to
Yes.
keep going to the same places with the same fabulous vendors and also learn new fun things to do there.
That's right.
I am all in. So,
Yes.
so
Wow.
that is how I did it.
Hmm.
And I know that some people are not like, oh, today we're jumping off this cliff. Let's do
That's right.
it.
That's right.
Like,
Yeah.
so what I often suggest people do is try it on the daily
Hmm.
by just before you, if you don't have a time crunch and you're going to the store, what route do I want to take to the store today? Oh, I really
Right.
like that beautiful house. I'm going to go the longer way and drive by those houses. When
Yeah.
you're looking at the menu at a restaurant, shutting your eyes, asking your body,
Mm.
what do you
Hmm.
want to eat?
That's right.
What do you want? And just getting into this practice of checking in,
Hmm.
because my personal definition of checking in used to be take the temperature of everybody in the room and
Mm.
set myself on fire if they're too cold, or
Oh, yeah.
like
Right.
and again, I just thought I was being the good girl. I thought that was my godly
Right.
duty.
Hmm.
It was
Servant's
very
heart. Yeah. Your
exactly,
servant's
because
heart.
again,
Yes.
nobody was mad. No one was
Right.
mad that I was
Right.
self-abandoning at every turn. And again, my shift in consciousness around that, my shift in perspective, my personal awareness, I'm not mad.
Right.
I'm
Right.
just not going to do that anymore.
That's right. Yeah. That's kind of what I
So,
hear you as you're talking. I'm just thinking about this place of you just gave yourself permission,
yeah,
to kind of like, and then you look at it almost like this, I always had permission. Like, why did I ever get to the place where I thought I didn't, but,
right.
or
I just
never
didn't
really
know.
acknowledged it? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then as soon
That's
as
so
I
good.
realized I had agency, then I
Yes.
started using it.
Yes, I love that agency word. I love that. Every time I don't use that in my normal language. Every time somebody uses that, I was like, such a good word. I should write that one down and use it more often.
Yes,
It is so powerful. Yeah.
it
That's so
is.
good.
And it's this empowering
Yes.
and embodying this new way that really, although there are some ripple effects that do um, other people engage with the ripple
Sure.
effects of my change and the
Mm-hmm.
decisions that I'm making now. But really, it's just an inside job. It's
Mm,
really just this movement into the woman that God created me to be,
right.
and using my voice for the words that He's putting in my heart, and
Mm-hmm.
to do that with as much courage
Yes.
as I can muster,
Yes. That's right.
and trusting His love for me, and that He's equipped me for every single thing that I need to do. And I feel like that sounds like I've read your book, and I haven't read your book.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Yes, that's so funny. Oh, that's so funny. That was a great transition. Dun, dun, dun.
Thank you.
No, that's so good. I love that you said that. And you're right. I didn't know all the pieces. I had listened to a few podcast
Right.
episodes as I was going through. So I think that's so beautiful. And I love that you are at this place now where you're like, I had faith. I had this childlike faith. I learned these things. I was following these rules or things or beliefs or things I didn't even understand. But I think we do all get to that place where we really do get, hopefully, I say this, hopefully we have time this side of, eternity to get the chance to stop and ask yourself, what do you really truly believe? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, because some people don't, right? That's just the reality of life and tragedy. But I have been on this discovery journey for the last few years, which is really kind of where the book came from. And it came from a season of writing. I've been kind of a writer for years off and on and
Mm,
doing other things, but more so as therapy. So again, back to the things that you love. Like it's taken me about 10 years of writing with intention and having great friends come alongside me. I remember going to the church 10 years ago and walking in and having a dear friend who is my best mentor, like writer, my first real writer friend, as I say. And she had written several books. And I went to her one day and I said, can you just help me get this out? Because I was writing these
mm.
things down and I just needed I was going through a healing journey and I needed help, So I say
Right.
that now, going back all these years, I was like, I've always been a writer in some form or fashion, but never considered myself an author or a writer.
Mm.
And so that discovery journey has been a beautiful, hard thing. but this side of it now, I love writing. Like it's one of those
Yay.
things that you look at your life and you're like, what are the 3 or 4 things that, kind of I say are eternal that,
Mm,
that last long after, brick and mortars fall down, and being able to give words of hope to others
yeah.
and to leave words, like we won't always be here on this earth in this bodies. And so it's just like, for me, it's a beautiful thing, being able to like share those things and leave words for people to find in the future. So
Right.
anyway,
It's legacy.
it is. Yes. And not in an arrogant legacy, but I mean, maybe there's a tinge of it, but it's really just like
Yeah.
looking at this season and kind of what are the things that I value and what are the things that bring me joy? And then unapologetically being present in those things. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so that's what I'm learning to do too. That's why I ask, because I'm a student, just like you said, a student
Right.
of myself. Yeah. So good.
I love the word unapologetic as well, because I feel like for me, I'll speak for myself, getting to the place of becoming unapologetic feels like, get out of my way, people. Like, I'm going to
Bossy.
say what I have to say. And
Oh, yeah.
as if I'm
Right.
taking all these chains off
Mm,
that I put on myself.
that's right. Yeah.
And nobody, ever since I've become unapologetic, nobody
Hmm.
has asked me to apologize for anything.
Right.
So I feel like it's even this thing that we're needing to step into with this level of ferocity
Hmm. Hmm.
that isn't actually, maybe
Required.
it's necessary because that's
Yeah.
what's going to get us up there, but I acted like it was a mountain and it was a curb.
Hmm.
And I just
Yeah.
needed to take a
That's right.
step. And
Yeah.
it was not everything I was afraid of happening didn't happen.
Yeah. That's so good.
And it was all, the view is 1,000 times better from here. And
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
is great. And, I apologize if I've already said this. Like I said, I only record a
No.
podcast on Thursdays. So sometimes I
Yes.
don't know if I've already said this, but,
Oh, it's okay.
there have been, I almost said the word casualties. I'm not going to say casualties. There have been
Hmm.
relationships that have ended
Hmm.
as a, mm, as a result of this change, but also because it was time to complete, and the
Sure.
change in my thinking and in the way that I was choosing to live my life just made the awareness
Hmm.
of that need to complete evident. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
I
sense.
it
Yeah.
didn't one didn't trigger the other. It just cleaned my glasses about
Mm.
what was happening.
Oh, you cleaned your glasses. That's so good. I
Yes.
say that, I talk about that a little bit in the book, like the lenses that we choose to look at the world, and that kind of thing. And
Mm,
I'll share this story kind of maybe. I have a really good friend of mine, back to the legacy thing and where I've been in this
yes.
season. My, really one of my very dear friends passed away, earlier this year,
Oh, I'm
just not very long
sorry.
ago from cancer, very young. And so we walked through that with her. Thank you very much. It was a really hard season, but I got to walk through her diagnosis for 5 years
Mm,
and watch her lenses change. And I think
mm,
that's a big part of how, as you go back to the questions of what do you value, like I've not had a terminal diagnosis, so my lenses are still how they are.
right.
And it was just for, I guess, for anyone who's gone through that, or you've loved someone, if they've gone through those transitions, and it's very, it's just life changing for you to go back and really say, what do I value with the time that I have, and it helps you to get super clear, like you're
Right.
saying. So I think lenses are cleaned, or what we value, but there's a great clarity in that. And I feel like with the clarity comes that confidence, like you're saying. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be a negative confidence, and it doesn't even have to be agitated or a chip on your shoulder. It's just that settling in. And what I think of is just that peace of knowing, it's just the peace of
Right.
knowing, and not disrespectfully, you're not like,
Totally.
but you're just kind of like, I'm not going that way anymore. This is the way I'm
Right.
going. And these are the things I value. And these are the people in my life. And this is what I'm going to hold space for. And yeah. And there it is very freeing, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I
Yes,
think it's very important for us all to, do, hopefully not with tragedy, but, sometimes tragedy is a catalyst for that. So
absolutely. I
yeah,
think there's, just this understanding that we can course correct,
that's it. Yes.
and we're
Yeah.
also allowed to make mistakes,
Yes.
and we're
Hmm.
allowed to make mistakes with money. We're
Hmm.
allowed to make mistakes with people.
That's right.
It's just happens, and how
Yeah.
we repair, how we recover from that,
Hmm.
or what we do afterwards, that's more important
Right.
than whatever it was that got us to that new place of decision making.
That's right. Yeah,
So
that's very true.
tell me about the book. I
Okay.
love the title, I love the premise,
Thank you.
and I love that I've not considered it before. So
Really.
I love that it's clever and
Oh,
well done. And I'm
thank
just
you.
excited to hear how long you've been working on this way of thinking, and
Sure.
how you have so beautifully shared it with the world.
Oh, that's the sweetest thing. Look, I have one. I
I'm so
just got it.
excited. Let me see.
I just got my author copy last night, so I don't know when
Yay.
this will air for everybody else, and they probably may not see it. But look, it's a real book. Isn't that
I
cool?
love it.
Thanks. First
Congratulations.
person outside my family who's been able to see it live.
Oh,
But
thank you.
you're
It's
very welcome.
beautiful.
Thanks, Wendy, for sharing that with me. It's super cool.
Hmm.
So I think back to the writing journey. I've been, writing for about 10 years, and I've done different things, worked in bivocational ministry. I've served in that space for a long time, was in the military, worked as a defense contractor, Department of Army civilian. My husband's was active duty, and then started a consulting company after, and kind of in the pandemic when I lost my job, no notice. So again, one of those
Mm.
doors closed and another door opens, life. And so I went through these different seasons, and it really, the story for the premise of the book was like, I got to this place where we were leading youth group one Sunday night at church, and a young girl across the table who was 15, I was asking how are things going? We're getting into the discussion part of the small group. And she looks at me with this intensity, and she says, and she was so upset. And she said, I don't know my purpose. And I looked at her and I was like, you're like a freshman. What is happening right now?
Yeah.
Initially I just got, man, is this like, why is this so consuming? And I just looked around the room at all the other girls that were sitting there, and teenagers and college, young college students. And they all started to nod their head in agreement. And my heart just sank for them. Like it was just this mom heart where I was like, wait, 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 wait,
Right.
wait, what's happening? Back
Yeah.
to those things we believe, and this message or whatever. And I just quickly, like with no thought, I said, wait, wait. I said, God has called us to two things: to love him with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to
Hmm.
love your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
And the first is almost impossible. And it's going to take you a lifetime. Like there's no get there. You know what I mean? It's this long journey of just falling down, just all the beautiful things that you've already said. It's just this long enduring journey, this relationship, this friendship, this thing. And you're going to learn things, and you're going to fall down, and you're going to get back up, and you're going to do it again and again and again. And then he told us to love our neighbor as ourselves. And you can do that in a billion different ways. Like your whole life, right? So you don't carry this burden, like this purpose burden. It was just, that's not what life is about, and my heart was just so overwhelmed at the time. Like, can't they see themselves as beautiful and capable, and all the hope they have in the world, and all their future and the opportunity? I was just like, it in that moment, they couldn't see it, and I was
Mm.
just, and so I left that night, and it really kind of upset me. And I spent weeks and weeks, I was just praying about it. And I was like, is there like a purpose? We all get one little box, and then we have to live in that box for our whole life, and we chase it around. And, so that was really like the initial conversation. And I go back to my friend passing away in these other scenarios in my life. And all these things I go through and I have gone through, and I've asked the question 100, times, but it got to this place where I was like, but what do I know to be true? Right.
Mm,
And I know that, God has loved me with an everlasting love, right? It says in Jeremiah 31:3, I've loved you with an everlasting love. So if I know that God loves me and he will never leave me, those are truths I can hold on to. Right. And so in
yeah.
every season of my life, when there was any hard thing, when something didn't make sense, and I would say this all the time, almost without thinking, I was like, God is good, you know, God is good. God is good. And so I was like, that's a truth, right? There's a promise there. And so if that one promise is true, that he loves us with an everlasting love, are there other promises that we can hold on to instead of chasing after purpose like this nebulous thing? And so I spent the last 3 years, I guess now, studying the theology and psychology of purpose. And to your point, like what you believe when you're sitting, and learning as you're growing in church or your faith community, and then going back and saying, but what do the scriptures actually say? Like for me, from a Christian perspective, like we quote these verses, but do we really know what they mean? Like, do we really study them to understand? And I kept going back through the verses, and it was like, it is God's purpose, right? There's a divine purpose and a sovereignty that is his, that he holds and he controls, and he has the authority over. And so it just really kind of flipped over my apple cart, if you will, about purpose.
Right.
And so I got to the place, well, if I can't find the answer, like if there might not be a purpose answer to my question, like I might not know why, my friend died at 38, I might not ever get that answer. I might not know why all of these other kind of tragedies like we talked about before. But I do have a promise that he will never leave me. I have a promise that he will give me wisdom. I have a promise that he will give me provision. And those I can hold on to. They're very
Hmm.
tactical, tangible. So I started to study his promises. And there are, I think in the book, I say 8,810. There are thousands of promises in the scriptures, depending upon what theology, perspective that you use. So there are thousands of promises that God has already given us. And in that revelation, I just realized like there are these gifts that God has given us that are everywhere. And
Hmm.
so I can chase after purpose and have the anxiety of purpose and the idol of purpose. I can do that my whole life, right? And have uncertainty and doubt and isolation, or I can rest in his promises. And those bring me great peace. And so I just now, I kind of say, now like my perspective is completely different now. So I choose to hold on to his promises. And every day, I find a new promise, and that brings me great, great joy. So,
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I love that reframe because you're right. The quest for
yes,
purpose feels
yes,
mysterious. It
mm-hmm,
feels like it's like the other youth group question of what is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, because it's the unforgivable sin. And it was like,
right,
well, what is it? Well, no one knows. So hope you don't do it. Fingers
right,
crossed. It's like, what is that?
right.
And I
That's so
mean,
good.
what I've learned about God through my life is that he's not mean,
Yeah,
and he's not trying to play a trick on us, and he's not hiding behind the door telling you, gosh, I hope you find me and I'm going to keep moving. Like, it's not how he does it. And again, the quest for figuring out what this mysterious thing is that only we're here to do has all of our focus on us
yeah,
and on
yes.
something that's elusive and something that is a complete distraction from the actual work that we're here to do, which is to love.
Yeah, that's what I think too. And I got to this place where I was like, is this a deception then? Does it become some kind of idol/deception? Because if I sit back and I go through all my Bible study groups in the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years, and the mom groups, like we were talking about, before we started recording, like the mom guilt or the different things, I have heard this countless times, and not just from clients that I'm consulting or people who come up for business coaching advice. I want to start a business or nonprofit because I want to find my purpose or for my life to have meaning. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that at all. But when it becomes the chase is all
Mhm.
about the purpose, right?
Mhm.
I think from a Christian perspective, we lose sight of the sovereignty of God. We lose sight of, relying on him in our daily journey, and we make it about us a
Mhm.
lot more than we do make it about him and trusting in him and those things. And then because of that, it does keep us from isolated. It keeps us fearful. I talk in the book about the psychology of purpose and how, we have kind of these three elements, of our identity, and it's the self, right? Our concept of self, the social self, and then our self-esteem, right? So I kind of break that out and imagining, like, I use the analogy of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because I'm not a doctor. So I get to use really great things that my family and kids were like, yeah, this makes sense as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But it's like you have your, the concept of self that you have your, and then you have the social self that gets created when you're very small, right? And then you have the self-esteem, which is like the peanut butter and jelly that holds these two pieces of bread together. We walk around all day long measuring against the world and the church and all these things. And it's like, okay, but do you understand why underneath the surface, you're driven to find these answers to these questions, and then when you start to look at the world or the church or wherever and you're being told you have to find your purpose, you will believe that you've lost it. Like you kind of
Mhm.
believe, "Oh, I do need one."
Right.
And then if we fast forward 25 years ago, 30 years ago, right? Like where I remember growing up as a teenager, I don't remember having this like anxiety of wanting to find my purpose. But today it's everywhere. You see it everywhere all the time. And I thought, what happened? Like when did we put this at the front of every sermon and every t-shirt slogan and on every book and every Bible study? And so that's just really, I think there's a lot more going on, in the world and the influence and culture and those kinds of things with positive psychology and different, trends and things, which aren't bad, definitely aren't bad, but it shifts our, I think, our perspective, when we're people of faith. And so that was really for me, was just kind of opening my eyes to say, what is going on? And is there a purpose? We put a lot of stock in roles and titles, and that's
Yep.
okay. There's a big section of the book that I talk about performance, when purpose becomes performance, right? There's nothing wrong with that,
Mm.
but those end, you know? Like my job title changed 50 times, I mean, or suffering, right? We ask these questions like, what is the purpose of the pain? And we expect that there's going to be a box in there, like an answer.
Right.
And so you're not always going to get the answer to why the thing happened, right? And I think it is good when we can take our suffering and we can offer comfort to others through that, right? Through that journey.
Sure.
But for me in this season of my life, I found that it's more about seeing the Father's heart, to your point, what you said. It's like if I draw closer to the Father in my suffering, he promises me comfort. He doesn't promise that it always has to be used for somebody else's, but it's just that those promises that are like, I don't know, for me, they have been life changing. They bring me clarity and they bring me great sense of peace.
Yeah.
And I think that's, yeah, that's kind of the, the big piece of, where my heart is today.
Oh, I love that. And I'm glad that you wrote the book. It's really, there are
Oh,
so many books,
yeah.
purpose driven everything.
Yes.
And to have that search be for one thing as opposed to the 8,000 plus
Yeah.
promises that there are. And they're just 8,000 plus sweet reminders. They're 8,000 amazing trades
That's right.
of
Yeah.
if you're weary
That's
and
right.
heavy laden, you can give all your burdens to me, and then you can
Yeah.
take my yoke because it's easy and it's light. Like that
That's right.
is a good trade. I remember when I was a youth pastor, I used this Bible that had wide margins because it was a textbook in college. And I have so many notes, and there were a couple
Mm.
places where I just wrote, this is a great trade. This,
Oh,
don't be
yeah.
anxious for anything,
That's right.
but give everything over to God, and the peace of God, which passes understanding, peace
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't even make sense,
Right.
will be yours. That is an excellent trade.
Yeah.
I will take
That's true.
that. They're
That's right.
beautiful. All of the promises are abundant. And I mean, just it's fall in New England at the time of this recording.
Oh, I
And
bet it's beautiful.
there's
Yeah.
just abundance and love and joy and
Yeah. Yeah.
everything that we desire and everything that we require is here and available for
Hmm.
us. And we get what we're looking for. And so if we are looking for the good,
That's right.
that's what we find. And if we are looking for the bad, that is what we will find.
That's right. And I think there at the end of the book, part 3 of the book, I kind of do a deep dive on 3 promises because again, I can't go into 8,810. You know,
Well,
it's
you
not
could.
a theological study. Yes, I guess book number 2. But the 3, right, that I think are the most I don't know, the ones we come back to every day, right, is the promise of grace, the promise of wisdom, and the promise of provision. And I think those 3 promises are the ones that I come back to. And so I really did a deep dive at the end, like each chapter, you know, about choosing the confidence of grace, you know, and the wisdom and the provision, because to your point, like those are the ones that kind of mess us up. You know, when I get up today, I need wisdom for today, right? It's like back to that measure. Like, just give me today, Lord, the measure that I can hold for today. The sparrows, right? They don't worry about tomorrow. So just help me focus on today. There's a promise that God will give me wisdom in today, right? I ask and he'll give it. There's a promise that God will give me provision for today. And provision might not always be money, right? Provision might be 100 other things, but there is a promise that God does love me, right? God will protect me. God will provide provision. That's so far in the scriptures. You know what I mean? It's everywhere. And then there is a promise of daily grace, you know, or minute by minute grace, if that's what we need, you know. And I feel like those are the places where, from a like a deception and, you know, influence, it just gets us off kilter all the time. You know, I don't have this, I don't have that. We look at the emptiness of our hands, you know, we have this scarcity mindset and we don't really, you know, so then we get to struggle and then we get insecurity and then we get doubt and then we get anxiety. And it's just this, you know, like we were talking before, it's just this
Yep.
constant wheel. And so there are tons of other promises, you know. And it's been beautiful since I finished the manuscript and it started going through the publishing. I laugh, I say, but I'll sit down in my devotion time, or I'll be in, you know, church and sermon, or I'll be talking to someone and a new promise will come by it, like, and I'll find it. And I'm like, I'm showing it to my husband. I'm like, oh, look, here's a new promise. There's a promise of restoration, or there's a promise of, you know, whatever it
Oh,
is.
it's
So
such a
yeah,
beautiful treasure hunt.
it is. It is. That's exactly when we were writing the book, my amazing book coach, she would help me and she was like, they're like gifts, you know? And I was like, yeah. And they're all just like little hidden presents everywhere. And
Mhm.
I feel like when we're asking the question of what is my purpose, I feel like God is like, I told you, love me and love the
Right.
world. Now go open all my presents that I've left for you.
Right.
Yeah. They're
Right.
already
I
out there.
love it. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I hope you'll be making affirmation cards and
Oh,
all of
that's so
these
good.
promises that we can just pull out of the bin every
Yes.
day. It's just
Oh,
so fun.
that's so good. And the other thing I would like to say, or the thing that I've come to back to the faith thing, like you said, because I do feel like it has been a discovery journey for me on a lot of what do I believe, what do I not believe, you know, which I'm thankful for. Is like when I started this purpose, you know, quest for myself, I was like, the algorithm has to be true for everyone or it can't be true for anyone, you know?
Hmm.
And so I have a post it that's on my whiteboard, but it basically said the promise has to be true for, you know, a 15-year-old freshman, a
Hmm.
single mom with 3 kids, you know, a cancer survivor, and my 93-year-old grandma, because
Hmm.
they're all asking the same question, you know?
Hmm.
And so that's where I came back to like, is there a fundamental truth that's true for everyone? Like from a, you know, from a gospel perspective, we say it's the gospel, but what does that actually look like in real life? Because it has to be true for all of them or it can't be true for any of them. And that's where I just got to this place where I thought, what are we doing to the church and to ourselves, you know, when we're motivating and trying to tell everyone to go search and chase something that may not be able to be found, you know? So
That's a big question. That is a whole nother show. I'm certain.
it is. It's so
Wow.
big, though, isn't it? It
Yeah.
really is. Yeah.
And, I think that a part of what makes that question feel really big is that is in my personal no pile. So we
Mm,
talked earlier about letting your yes be yes and your no be no. And
right.
there are questions that come across my awareness that I'm like, ooh, ooh,
Yeah.
say more about that. Like, I want to dig in. I'm really eager to have some more understanding or discover or be curious about.
Right.
And that particular question didn't do that for me. And
Yeah.
I love the reminders that my knower is working. I
Hmm.
love the reminders that every swimming hole is not an invitation for me to jump into, and
Yes.
that every question is not mine to answer, because I think, again, it comes
Hmm.
back to that distraction.
Right.
It's like, if I'm going to now be an investigative reporter and
Mm,
blow the lid wide open on this whole purpose nonsense, like,
yeah.
that's not the best use of my resources, and yet it's so aligned for you, and that's so beautiful. The way that you are doing that was not to discount
Right.
somebody else's
Right.
process and
That's right.
book writing
Mm-mm. That's right.
prolificness.
That's right. That's
It
exactly right.
it was just to bring to light the other side of the story.
Or all my questions. I think that was the thing. You can get into this imposter syndrome, for lack of a better word, when you're writing a book or when you're in that space or you're trying anything new. You could use the
Yeah.
same thing as your example for your starting your business and doing the things. And when I first sat down, I said that. And I say it in the book too, like I'm not a great social psychologist or theologian, I'm not a philosopher. I'm just a girl who has a lot of
Hey, you're an
questions about my
author.
life.
That's
Yeah.
all.
And so I love that my coach, she was very kind. She was like, "You're not saying that you have the right, the only answer.
Mhm.
You're just saying, I'd like to pull a seat up to the table and have a conversation because I have questions and I'd like to explore them." And so that was really kind. And so I say that now too, like it's my journey. I put it at the back of the book. I talk about growing a garden, the analogy of growing a garden, and I feel like life is very much in the same. We can use that example for a lot of our growing and weeding and pruning and all the things we do. Seasons of rest and seasons of plenty. Yeah, and so I think it's just a lifelong journey of trying to discover and answer these questions, and then for each one of us, we do come to the finality, and the frailty of life, whether we want to know, or not. I mean, it all does come. We get to a certain point, and so my hope with people reading the book is that they can see, right, the great love that God has for us, that they can see the endless possibility and hope that's in each and every single day, that they can see that their voice does matter, right? That their life does have value, that, they are handpicked from time and space for a beautiful reason that might not make sense to them this side of heaven or eternity, and that there is hope and there is, great grace there. And they have something beautiful to offer the world, like every single day.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I just hope that they will find the courage, like you said, to kind of lean into that. And we'll all still keep asking questions together, I guess.
Absolutely, we will. And so my last question for you is, what does this season of rest look like?
That's so good. I think I'm gonna take some time off after the book launches. Some time at the beach because that brings me great
Good.
joy, and just refocusing. So I've built my business about 4 years ago, started that. So as an evolution, like you said, you're kind of back in. Now I'm in this season of like, where does my yes need to go? And
Mhm.
how can I love people well, knowing that I'm a limited resource. You know what I mean? I have only so much heart and emotional capacity. Yeah. So I'm hoping, to really focus some of the work next year on some more writing, which I
Great.
love. So yes. And then just really helping kind of like this connective tissue with faith driven leaders. I have a podcast, Entrusted to Lead, which I love. I love my podcast. I would do that all day if I could too. So I love it.
Isn't it fun?
It is. It's the best thing. I tell people I should have done it. I should have done it when I was 10, but we didn't have that back then.
I love
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah. And just really work in that place of like pouring those pieces in and offering, the hope. And then helping people to kind of connect, their heart, their faith, journey with that, whatever that is, in all the facets of their life. I say at the end of the book, what would your life be like if you let all of God live through all of you? And I feel
Mm,
like that's really the challenge for us as people of faith, like if we can come to the end of our life and we can say that for the best of our human ability, we let all of God live through all of us, then I don't know that there's anything greater. So just trying to help people figure out how to do that would be my next thing.
that doesn't sound like rest.
It doesn't sound like rest. Well, doing the things that bring me
Yes,
joy.
it's
Yes.
true. It's
Yes. You're
true.
right.
That's
Not spreadsheets.
beautiful.
But
Exactly. Your knower is working. Very
that's right.
good. Oh, I love that. I have really appreciated this
Thank you.
conversation and all of your time.
Thank
Please
you so
tell
much.
everyone where they can find and follow you, where they can get their hands on your book, all the good things.
Okay, yeah. So the best place is my website, danitacummins.com. So it links to my consulting pages and the work I do in the ministry. I'm on Danita Cummins, all the socials, thankfully. So easy to find me there. And then the book will be available on Amazon. So you can definitely grab it. Promise Over Purpose, Unveiling the Path to a Peace-Filled Life.
Gorgeous. And the podcast?
Is Entrusted to Lead. And it's on all the major platforms too. Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio.
Perfect. We will link everything down in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for your time, Danita. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you so much. It was so fun. Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wrighthouse and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.